They said kindness was weakness in a city like Seattle. I should have walked past him, past the old man crumpled on the wet pavement, while strangers laughed. But I didn't. And now 3 alphas want me as their mate. My name is Jiwon Park, and if I'm being honest, life in Seattle hadn't been kind to me. Not cruel, just indifferent. I was 24, unmated, and raising a 4-year-old son named Minho on my own. His father, an alpha I'd trusted once, loved even had vanished the moment he found out I was pregnant. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone, like I'd been something disposable, being an omega without a pack, without a bond, without even a decent job. That made me invisible in this city, the kind of invisible where people look through you, not at you. But Minho, he saw me. He always saw me. Appa, you're thinking too loud again. I blinked, glancing down at my son as we walked hand in hand through the early November drizzle. His tiny fingers were warm inside mine, his other hand clutching the strap of his worn backpack. He looked up at me with those wide, curious eyes so much like mine, it hurt sometimes, and tilted his head. I'm not thinking loud, I said softly, squeezing his hand. I'm just thinking. About work? Smart kid. Maybe a little. He frowned, the way only a 4-year-old could when they were trying to be serious. You work too much, Appa. I work enough to keep us warm, I corrected gently, brushing a strand of wet hair off his forehead. And to buy you those dinosaur chicken nuggets you love. His face lit up. The ones with the spiky tails? The very ones. Minho grinned, and just like that, the weight in my chest lifted. Just a little. Just enough. This was why I did it. Why I worked 2 jobs, day shifts at a logistics company doing data entry, night shifts cleaning office buildings downtown. Why I stretched every dollar until it screamed. Why I smiled even when my bones ached and my heat suppressants made me nauseous. Because Minho deserved better than the hand we'd been dealt. We turned the corner toward the bus stop, and I felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. I checked my watch. 7:43 a.m. I had 17 minutes to drop Minho off at daycare and catch the express bus to the office. If I missed it, I'd be late. Again. And my supervisor, Mrs. Choi, had made it very clear last week, one more tardy, Jiwon, and we'll have to let you go. I couldn't afford to lose this job. Not with rent due in 2 weeks and Minho's daycare fees eating half my paycheck. Appa? Why do people stare at us sometimes? I froze mid-step. Minho wasn't looking at me. He was looking ahead, at the bus stop where a small cluster of people waited under the shelter. A few of them had glanced our way, nothing overt, just the usual once-over people gave unmated omegas in public, especially ones with kids. I forced my voice to stay light. They're probably just wondering where we got such a cool dinosaur backpack. He giggled, but I could feel the weight of those stares like pinpricks on my skin. In the Omegaverse, biology was destiny. Alphas led, betas balanced, omegas. We were supposed to be cherished, protected, claimed. But an unmated omega with a child and no alpha in sight, that made people uncomfortable. It disrupted the narrative. It whispered of failure, of something broken. I'd stopped caring what they thought a long time ago, or at least I told myself I had. Come on, I murmured, tugging Minho forward. Let's get you to Miss Hannah before the bell rings. The daycare was only 3 blocks away, a small, warm building with crayon drawings taped to the windows, and the faint smell of cinnamon rolls wafting out every morning. Minho loved it there, and Miss Hannah was kind to us, even when I was late with payments. I crouched down in front of him at the door, adjusting his jacket and smoothing down his hair. Be good today, okay? I'm always good, Appa. I smiled despite myself. I know you are. He wrapped his arms around my neck, squeezing tight, and I held him close for just a second longer than necessary. His scent soft, clean, like baby powder, and rain filled my lungs, and I let it ground me. I love you, Minhoya. Love you too, Appa. He pulled back, grinning, and ran inside without looking back. I watched him go, my chest tight, and then turned toward the bus stop. The drizzle had thickened into proper rain now, cold and biting against my skin. I pulled my thin jacket tighter and quickened my pace, my sneakers splashing through shallow puddles. Just get through today, one day at a time. That's what I told myself every morning. One shift, one meal, one smile for Minho. That was enough. It had to be, because I didn't have the luxury of wanting more. Not in a world that had already decided I wasn't worth keeping. I made it to the office with 3 minutes to spare. Barely. My lungs burned as I slipped through the glass doors of Hankook Logistics, shaking rain from my hair and trying not to look as frantic as I felt. The lobby smelled like coffee and air conditioning, sterile and cold in a way that always made my skin prickle. I swiped my ID badge at the turnstile and headed straight for the elevators, keeping my head down. Cutting it close again, Park. I stiffened. Mrs. Choi stood near the coffee station, her arms crossed, her expression carved from ice. She was a beta in her 50s, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, and she'd never liked me. I wasn't sure if it was because I was an Omega, or because I had a kid, or just because I existed in her line of sight. Maybe all three. I'm on time, I said quietly, glancing at the clock on the wall. 8:27 a.m. My shift started at 8:30. Barely. Her eyes flicked over me, my damp jacket, my worn sneakers, the faint shadows under my eyes. You look exhausted. I'm fine. Are you? She stepped closer, and I caught the faint scent of her disapproval, bitter like burnt toast. Because last week you dozed off at your desk. The week before, you filed the Busan shipment logs under the wrong account. And now you're showing up looking like you haven't slept in days. My jaw tightened. I said I'm fine. Ji-won. Her voice dropped, not unkind, but not warm either. I'm not trying to be cruel, but this company can't afford mistakes, and neither can you. One more slip, and I'll have no choice but to let you go. Do you understand? I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Yes, ma'am. She studied me for a moment longer, then sighed. Get to your desk and drink some coffee. You look half dead. I didn't wait for her to change her mind. I walked quickly to my cubicle on the 3rd floor, sank into my chair, and exhaled slowly. One more slip. The words echoed in my head, heavy and suffocating. I couldn't afford to lose this job. The cleaning gig at night paid barely minimum wage, and it wasn't enough to cover rent, daycare, food, heat suppressants, and everything else Minho needed. This job, boring, soul-draining data entry, though it was the only thing keeping us afloat. I booted up my computer and pulled up the shipment logs, forcing myself to focus. But my hands were shaking, just a little, just enough to notice. The morning crawled by in a blur of spreadsheets and emails. By noon, my eyes were burning and my stomach was growling. But I'd skipped breakfast to save money and lunch wasn't in the budget today. I had a granola bar in my bag, the kind that tasted like cardboard, but it would have to wait until I finished the Inshan account reconciliation. I was halfway through when I heard it. Laughter, loud, mocking, echoing from the hallway near the break room. I frowned, glancing toward the noise. More laughter, then a voice, male, sneering. Look at him. Pathetic old man, can't even stand up straight. My stomach twisted. I shouldn't have cared. I should have stayed in my seat, minded my business, finished my work. But I didn't. I stood, my legs moving before my brain caught up and walked toward the break room. The hallway opened into a small lounge area with vending machines, a microwave, and a couple of tables. Near the far wall, I saw him. An elderly man, small, frail, with silver hair and a janitorial uniform, was on his knees, trying to pick up a mop that had fallen. His hands were trembling, his breathing labored. And standing over him were 3 employees from the sales department. I recognized them, young, cocky alphas and betas who spent more time bragging about their commissions than actually working. One of them nudged the mop further away with his foot, grinning. Come on, old man. You're making us late for lunch. Another laughed. Maybe he's too senile to remember how mops work. The elderly man didn't respond. He just kept reaching for the mop, his face flushed with shame. Something inside me snapped. Stop! The word came out sharper than I intended, and all 3 of them turned to look at me. The first one, a beta named Jay, smirked. What's your problem, Park? Leave him alone. Or what? He crossed his arms, his grin widening. You gonna report us to HR? Pretty sure they don't care about some old janitor who can't do his job. He's doing his job just fine, I said, my voice steady now. You're the ones wasting company time. Jay's smirk faltered. Watch your mouth, Omega. I ignored him and walked past them, kneeling beside the elderly man. Up close, I could see the tremor in his hands, the exhaustion in his eyes. It's okay, I said softly, picking up the mop and handing it to him. I've got it. He looked at me, surprised, and then his expression crumpled into something fragile and grateful. Thank you, he whispered, his voice hoarse. Thank you, young man. I helped him to his feet, steadying him with a hand on his arm. Behind me, Jay scoffed. Unbelievable. You're really going to baby some random janitor? I turned at meeting his eyes. He's not random. He's a person, and you should be ashamed of yourself. For a moment, the hallway went silent. Then a new voice cut through the tension. She's right. I froze. The voice was low, calm, and laced with authority, the kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to command a room. I turned slowly, and that's when I saw him. The alpha standing in the doorway was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a tailored black suit that looked like it cost more than my rent. His hair was dark and perfectly styled, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. But it was his eyes that stopped me cold. Dark, unreadable, fixed entirely on me. The air shifted. I felt it in my chest, in my lungs, in the way my pulse suddenly kicked into overdrive. His scent hit me a second later, cedar and smoke, clean and overwhelming, wrapping around me like a command I didn't know how to disobey. Alpha. My instinct screamed at me to lower my eyes, to submit, to step back. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because the elderly man beside me suddenly gasped, his face lighting up. Seojun-ah! The alpha's gaze flickered to him, and for the first time, his expression softened. Harabeoji. Grandfather. My stomach dropped. The old man I'd just helped, the one these idiots had been mocking, was this alpha's grandfather? Jay and his friends had gone pale. Seojun stepped forward, his presence filling the hallway, and stopped directly in front of me. He was so close I could feel the heat radiating off him, could see the faint gold flecks in his dark eyes. Thank you, he said quietly. His voice meant only for me. For helping him. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. It was nothing. It wasn't. His gaze held mine for a beat too long, and I felt something shift in the air between us. Something I didn't have a name for. Then his grandfather chuckled softly, patting my arm. Seo-jun-ah, the old man said, his voice warm and conspiratorial. This is the one I told you about. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? He's the one, his grandfather continued, grinning now, his eyes twinkling with something I couldn't place. The one I said you should mate. The world tilted. Seojun's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, surprise maybe, or recognition. And then quietly, almost to himself, he murmured, Fate has a sense of humor. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, because the most powerful-looking alpha I'd ever seen was standing inches away from me, smelling like every fantasy I'd ever tried to suppress, and his grandfather had just declared I was destined to be his mate. I should have left. I should have excused myself, walked back to my desk, and pretended this entire interaction never happened. But I couldn't move. Seojun was still looking at me, not the way Jay and his friends had, with mockery or disdain. Not even the way Mrs. Choi did, with thinly veiled judgment. He was looking at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle, like I was something unexpected that had appeared in his carefully ordered world, and he didn't quite know what to do with me. His grandfather, still holding onto my arm with surprising strength for someone so frail, was beaming like he just won the lottery. Seojun-ah, didn't I tell you? The old man's voice was bright, almost giddy. I said I met someone kind, someone with a good heart, and here he is. Harabeoji, Seojun said softly, his tone patient but firm. You can't just tell strangers I'm going to mate them. Why not? It's the truth. I finally found my voice. I'm sorry, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, the grandfather interrupted, patting my hand. I know fate when I see it, And you, young man, are fated for my grandsons. Grandsons. Plural. My brain stuttered. What? Seojun exhaled slowly, and for the first time, I saw the faintest crack in his composure, a flicker of something that might have been embarrassment, or maybe exasperation. He has 3 grandsons, Seojun said quietly, his eyes still on me. Triplets. I'm one of them. My mouth went dry. 3 alphas. Triplets. And their grandfather thought I was supposed to mate all of them? I must have looked as panicked as I felt, because Seojun's expression softened just slightly, just enough that I could see the human beneath the intimidating exterior. You don't have to worry, he said, his voice low and steady. My grandfather says a lot of things. You're not obligated to, but you should be. His grandfather cut in, indignant now. Seojun, look at him. He's perfect, kind, brave, and he has a good scent. I flinched. He could smell me. I'd been on suppressants for years, the kind that muted an omega's scent to almost nothing, made us harder to track, harder to notice. It was safer that way, especially as a single parent. But apparently this old man could still sense something. Seojun must have noticed my discomfort, because he gently took his grandfather's arm and guided him a step back, putting space between us. Harabeoji, you're making him uncomfortable. I'm not trying to. I know. Seojun's voice was soft, almost affectionate. But let him breathe. The old man huffed but relented, releasing my arm. He looked up at me one more time, his eyes warm and sincere. Thank you again, young man, for your kindness. Not many people would have stopped. I swallowed hard, my chest tight. It was the right thing to do. Exactly. He smiled, then glanced at Seojun. See? Good heart. Seojun didn't respond. He was still watching me, and I couldn't read his expression, couldn't tell if he was annoyed, curious, or something else entirely. Behind us, Jay and his friends had already slipped away, no doubt eager to avoid whatever consequences might come from mocking the grandfather of someone who looked like he could buy and sell this entire company. I needed to leave too. I should get back to work, I said quickly, taking a step back. I'm glad your grandfather's okay. Seojun opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but I didn't wait to hear it. I turned and walked away, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack through my ribs. I barely made it back to my cubicle before my legs gave out. I sank into my chair, gripping the edge of my desk, and tried to breathe. What the hell just happened? I'd helped an old man. That was it. That was all I'd meant to do. But now his grandson, an alpha who radiated power and control, and something else I couldn't name, knew my face, knew I existed. And worse, his grandfather had looked at me like I was some kind of answer to a question I hadn't even asked. He's the one you should mate. I pressed my hands to my face, trying to block out the memory of Seojun's scent cedar and smoke, sharp and clean and overwhelming in a way that made my instincts scream. I hadn't reacted to an alpha's scent like that in years, not since Minho's father, and look how that had turned out. I forced myself to focus on the screen in front of me, pulling up the next batch of shipment logs. My hands were still trembling, but I ignored it. Just get through the day. Finish your work. Go home to Minho. Forget this ever happened. That's what I told myself. But I couldn't stop thinking about the way Seojun had looked at me, like I was something worth noticing. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze. I kept my head down, avoided the break room, and finished my work with 10 minutes to spare before my shift ended. Mrs. Choi didn't say anything when I clocked out, which I took as a small mercy. I caught the bus to Minho's daycare, my body aching from sitting in the same position for 8 hours. The rain had stopped, but the air was still damp and cold, clinging to my skin like a warning. When I walked through the daycare door, Minho was sitting at a table with a pile of crayons, drawing something with intense concentration. Appa! He looked up, his face lighting up, and ran over to me. I crouched down and caught him in a hug, breathing in his clean, safe scent. My chest loosened, just a little. Hey, Minho-ya, what were you drawing? A dinosaur eating a building. I smiled despite myself. That's very realistic. He giggled, then grabbed my hand. Can we get tteokbokki on the way home? My heart sank. Not tonight, bud. Maybe this weekend. His face fell, but he didn't argue. He never did. Smart, perceptive kid. Too perceptive. We walked home together, his small hand warm in mine, and I tried to push the day out of my mind, but I couldn't, because even now, hours later, I could still smell it. Cedar and smoke, like it had burned itself into my lungs. That night, after Minho was asleep, I stood in the tiny kitchen of our apartment and stared at the stack of bills on the counter. Rent, utilities, daycare, groceries, heat suppressants. The numbers didn't add up. They never did. I pressed my palms against the counter and closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. One day at a time. But some days that wasn't enough. Some days I wanted to scream. I didn't, of course, because Minho was sleeping in the next room, and he didn't need to know how close we were to the edge. I turned off the kitchen light and walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline, all glittering lights and distant lives I'd never touch. And then I thought about him again. Seojin, the way he looked at me, the way his scent had wrapped around me like a dare, the way his grandfather had said, "He's the one." I didn't believe in fate. I couldn't afford to. But for just a moment, just one breathless, foolish moment, I let myself wonder. What if? I didn't see him again for 3 days, but on the 4th day, everything changed. I was leaving the office after my shift, exhausted and running on too little sleep, when I felt it. That pull, that scent. I stopped in the middle of the lobby, my breath catching, and turned. Seojin was standing near the elevators, dressed in another immaculate suit, his hands in his pockets. He wasn't looking at me, but I knew somehow. I knew that he was waiting for me. My pulse kicked into overdrive. I should have walked past him, should have pretended I didn't notice, but I didn't. I walked over, my legs moving on instinct, and stopped a few feet away. "Are you following me?" I asked quietly. His eyes met mine, dark and unreadable. "No," he said. "I'm giving you a choice." "A choice?" He stepped closer, and I caught his scent again, stronger now, sharper, laced with something that made my knees weak. "My grandfather won't stop talking about you," Seojin said, his voice low. "He thinks you're important." "I'm not." "Maybe." His gaze didn't waver. "But I'd like to find out." My heart was pounding so hard I thought he could hear it. "Find out what?" He smiled just barely, just enough to soften the edges of his face. "If fate is real," he said, "or if my grandfather is just a meddling old man." I stared at him, my mouth dry, my mind racing. And then, before I could stop myself, I asked the question I shouldn't have. "What do you want from me?" Seojin's smile faded, and his expression turned serious. "Dinner," he said simply, "with me and my brothers, no expectations. Just a conversation." I should have said no. I should have walked away. But I didn't, because for the first time in 4 years, someone was looking at me like I mattered, like I was worth knowing. And God help me, I wanted to believe it. "Okay," I whispered. Seojin's eyes widened just slightly, like he hadn't expected me to agree, and then he nodded. "Tomorrow night, I'll pick you up." Before I could respond, he turned and walked toward the exit, his presence lingering in the air long after he was gone. I stood there frozen, my heart racing, and all I could think was, what have I just agreed to? The question echoed in my head all the way home, through picking up Minho from daycare, through microwaving leftover japchae for dinner, through bath time and bedtime stories. Even now, standing in the shower with lukewarm water running over my shoulders because the hot water heater was broken again, I couldn't stop replaying it. Seojin's voice, low, steady. "Dinner, with me and my brothers." His brothers, the other 2 triplets, 3 alphas. I pressed my forehead against the cold tile and tried to breathe through the rising panic in my chest. What was I thinking? I wasn't some naive kid anymore. I'd learned the hard way what happened when you trusted an alpha's interest, when you let yourself believe that maybe, just maybe, you were worth more than a quick heat cycle and a broken promise. Minho's father had taught me that lesson, and I'd sworn I'd never forget it. But Seojin, he was different, wasn't he? I turned off the water and stood there dripping, staring at my reflection in the fogged-up mirror. Pale skin, dark circles under my eyes, the faint mark on my collarbone where I'd been bitten once, years ago by someone who'd promised forever and delivered nothing. I looked tired. I looked used. And I had no idea why someone like Seojin, someone who looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine, who carried himself like the world bent to his will, would look at me twice. His grandfather likes you. That's all it was. Seojin was humoring an old man, being polite. There was no fate, no destiny, just kindness. And kindness didn't last. Not for people like me. The next day at work, I kept my head down and tried to focus. But my phone buzzed just after noon. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. This is Seojin. I'll pick you up at 7. What's your address? My heart kicked against my ribs. I stared at the message for a full minute, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I could still back out. I could say I'd changed my mind, that I had to work, that Minho was sick. It would be easy, safe, but my fingers typed the address before my brain could stop them. His response came almost immediately. Seojin, see you tonight. I set the phone down, my hands trembling, and pressed my palms flat against the desk. What are you doing, Jiwon? I didn't have an answer. By the time my shift ended, I was a mess. I rushed to pick up Minho, my mind racing through a dozen excuses I could give Miss Hannah for why I needed her to watch him tonight. But when I walked through the daycare door, she took one look at my face and smiled knowingly. Date night? I froze. What? No. It's not, Jiwon. She raised an eyebrow. You look like you're about to pass out. When's the last time you did something for yourself? I opened my mouth, closed it. She laughed softly. I'll watch Minho. No charge. Go. Miss Hannah, I can't ask you to... You're not asking, I'm offering. She glanced at Minho, who was building a tower out of blocks in the corner. He'll be fine. And you need this. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, my throat tight, and whispered, Thank you. By 6:45, I was standing in front of my bathroom mirror again, staring at the only decent shirt I owned, a simple black button-up I'd thrifted 2 years ago. It was wrinkled. Of course it was. I didn't own an iron. I smoothed it down with damp hands and told myself it didn't matter. This wasn't a real date. It was just dinner, a conversation, nothing more. But my reflection didn't look convinced. I looked scared. At 6:58, my phone buzzed. Seojin. I'm outside. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my jacket, the same thin, worn one I always wore, and headed downstairs. The moment I stepped outside, I saw it. A sleek black car idling at the curb. Not flashy, but expensive. The kind of car that whispered money without shouting it. And leaning against the passenger door, arms crossed, was Seojin. He was dressed more casually tonight, dark jeans, a charcoal sweater, a wool coat that probably cost more than my rent. His hair was slightly tousled, like he'd run his hands through it. And when his eyes met mine, something in my chest tightened. He didn't smile, but his gaze softened. Jiwon. Hearing my name in his voice did something to me I didn't want to name. Hi, I managed, walking toward him. He straightened, opening the passenger door. You look nervous. I'm not. You're a terrible liar. I huffed out a breath, and despite everything, a small smile tugged at my lips. Maybe a little nervous. Good, he said quietly. So am I. That stopped me. I looked up at him, startled, and he held my gaze for a long moment before gesturing to the car. Come on, my brothers are waiting. Right, his brothers, the other two alphas. My stomach twisted, but I slid into the passenger seat anyway. The interior smelled like leather and something else, something clean and woodsy that made my head spin. Seojin closed the door and walked around to the driver's side, settling in with an easy grace that made me feel clumsy by comparison. He didn't start the car immediately. Instead, he turned to look at me, his expression unreadable. If you want to leave at any point tonight, he said quietly, just say the word. No questions asked. I swallowed hard. Why would I want to leave? Because my brothers can be intense. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. And I don't want you to feel trapped. Trapped. The words sat heavy between us. I don't feel trapped, I said softly. Not yet, anyway. Seojin studied me for another moment, then nodded and started the car. We pulled away from the curb and I watched my building disappear in the side mirror, my heart pounding harder with every passing block. The restaurant wasn't what I expected. I'd been bracing myself for something overly formal, white tablecloths, crystal glasses, the kind of place where I'd feel out of place just breathing. But instead, Seojin pulled up to a small Korean BBQ spot tucked between a bookstore and a laundromat. The sign was hand-painted, the windows fogged with steam, and the smell of grilled meat and garlic hit me the moment I stepped out of the car. It felt normal. Almost. My grandfather's favorite place, Seojin said, coming to stand beside me. He says the galbi here tastes like home. I glanced at him, surprised. Your grandfather? He's the one who insisted on this dinner. Seojin's expression was wry. And he's the one who picked the restaurant. So if you hate it, blame him. I almost laughed, almost. But then the door to the restaurant opened and two men stepped out. Identical. Triplets. My breath caught. The first one was tall and broad-shouldered like Seojin, but his expression was sharper, more guarded. His hair was styled back, his jaw tight, and his eyes swept over me with the kind of assessing look that made my skin prickle. The second one was softer, not in build, but in presence. His hair fell slightly into his eyes, his posture was relaxed, and when he smiled at me, it was warm and disarming. You must be Jiwon, the softer one said, stepping forward. I'm Minjae, and this is Hyunwoo. The sharp one, Hyunwoo, didn't move. He just nodded once, his gaze still locked on me. Hi, I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Minjae's smile widened. Don't mind Hyunwoo, he's allergic to small talk. Hyunwoo shot him a look, but didn't deny it. Seojin stepped closer to me, his presence a solid, grounding weight at my side. Let's go inside, he said quietly, and before I could second-guess myself, I followed them through the door. The inside of the restaurant was warm and loud, families crowded around tables, meat sizzling on grills, the air thick with smoke and laughter. We were led to a private booth in the back, away from the noise, and I slid into the seat across from the three of them. 3 alphas, all looking at me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought they could hear it. Minjae was the first to speak. So, he said, leaning forward with an easy grin, our grandfather won't stop talking about you. Says you're brave, kind, fated. He paused, his grin turning playful. No pressure, though. I felt my face heat. He's very enthusiastic. That's one word for it, Hyunwoo muttered, his arms crossed. Seojin shot him a look. Hyunwoo shrugged. I'm just saying, we barely know him. That's why we're here, Minjae said lightly. To get to know him. And to see if Harabioji is right, Seojin added quietly, his eyes on me. I swallowed hard. Right about what? Seojin didn't answer immediately, but the way he looked at me, steady, searching, like he was trying to see past my walls, made my chest ache. About fate, he said finally. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and impossible. I didn't believe in fate, but sitting there, surrounded by 3 alphas who smelled like cedar and smoke and something I couldn't name, I wasn't so sure anymore. The server brought out banchan and set up the grill, and for a few minutes, the tension eased as we focused on food. Minjae took charge of the meat, flipping pieces with practiced ease and teasing Hyunwoo about burning the garlic. Seojin sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off him, and every time his arm brushed mine, my pulse stuttered. So, Minjae said, glancing at me as he placed a perfectly grilled piece of galbi on my plate. Tell us about yourself, Jiwon. What do you do? I hesitated. I work in logistics, data entry mostly. That's it? Hyunwoo's tone wasn't mocking, but it wasn't warm either. Just data entry? I also work nights, I said quietly. Cleaning office buildings. The table went silent. Minja's grin faded. Seojin's jaw tightened. Even Hyunwoo's expression shifted something that might have been surprise, or maybe respect. 2 jobs? Minjae asked softly. I nodded, not meeting their eyes. I have a son, Minho. He's 4, and it's just the 2 of us. Another silence. Longer this time. I could feel their eyes on me. But I kept my gaze on my plate, my hands gripping my chopsticks too tightly. You're raising him alone? Seojun's voice was low, careful. Yes. Where's his father? I flinched. The question hung in the air, sharp and invasive, and I felt my walls slam back up. Gone, I said flatly. He left before Minho was born. I haven't heard from him since. Hyunwoo's expression darkened. He abandoned you? He made his choice. My voice came out colder than I intended. And I made mine. Minjae leaned back, his eyes soft with something that looked like sympathy. That must have been hard. It was what it was. I forced myself to meet their eyes, my chin lifting. But Minho and I are fine. We don't need anyone. The words came out sharper than I meant, but I didn't take them back. Because it was true. We didn't need anyone. We couldn't afford to. Seojun was watching me again, his gaze unreadable, and I felt something twist in my chest, something uncomfortable and raw. I didn't come here for pity, I said quietly. If that's what this is, it's not, Seojun said, his voice firm. We're not pitying you, Jiwon. We're trying to understand you. Why? The question came out before I could stop it. Seojun blinked, surprised. What do you mean? Why do you care? I asked, my voice shaking now. You don't know me. Your grandfather met me once, and now you're all sitting here, looking at me like I'm something you're trying to figure out. But I'm not a puzzle. I'm just someone our grandfather thinks is important. Hyunwoo cut in, his tone blunt, and he's never wrong about people. I stared at him. He stared back, unflinching. Harabaoji has a gift, Minji said softly. He sees things in people that they don't see in themselves. And when he told us about you, he trailed off, glancing at his brothers. We had to meet you. We had to know if he was right. Right about what? I whispered. Minjae smiled, but it was tinged with something bittersweet. That you're our fated mate. The world tilted. I set my chopsticks down carefully, my hands trembling, and stood. I need some air. I didn't wait for a response. I walked out of the booth, through the crowded restaurant, and pushed open the door, stepping into the cold Seattle night. The air hit my lungs like a slap, sharp and bracing, and I leaned against the wall, pressing my palms against the rough brick. Fated mate. The words echoed in my head, loud and impossible. I didn't believe in fate. I didn't believe in destined bonds or perfect matches or alphas who wanted more than a quick claim. I'd stopped believing in fairy tales the day Minho's father walked out. But these 3, they were looking at me like I was something precious, something worth keeping. And God help me, I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe that maybe I wasn't as broken as I thought. The door opened behind me. I didn't turn. I already knew who it was. Jiwon. Seojun's voice was soft, careful, like he was afraid I'd bolt. I'm fine, I said, my voice tight. I just needed a minute. Take all the time you need. He didn't leave. He just stood there, a few feet away, his presence steady and grounding. We stood in silence for a long moment, the distant hum of traffic filling the space between us. I didn't mean to overwhelm you, Seojun said finally. You didn't. You're lying again, I huffed out a breath, something between a laugh and a sob. Maybe. He stepped closer, and I felt the warmth of him at my back, close but not touching. My grandfather, Seojun hesitated. He's not always right, but when he is, it's undeniable. And the way he talks about you, he trailed off and I heard him exhale slowly. I needed to see for myself if he was right. I turned finally and looked up at him. His face was shadowed in the dim streetlight, but his eyes were clear and steady. And, I whispered, what do you see? Seojun's gaze held mine, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the 2 of us. Someone stronger than they realize, Warren, he said quietly. Someone who's been hurt but hasn't let it break them. Someone who, He paused, his jaw tightening. Someone I don't want to walk away from. My breath caught. You don't know me, I said, but my voice had no strength left. Then let me. It wasn't a demand. It was a request, a question, a choice. I stared at him, my heart pounding, and I felt something inside me crack just a little, just enough to let the light in. I have a son, I said, my voice trembling. I have 2 jobs. I live in a tiny apartment with a broken heater and bills I can barely pay. I'm not what you think I am. I think you're exactly what my grandfather said you are, Seojin said softly, and I think you're afraid to let anyone see it. Tears burned at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them back. What if he's wrong? I whispered. Then we'll figure it out together. The door opened again, and Minho stuck his head out, his expression concerned. Everything okay? Seojun glanced at him, then back at me. Give us a minute, Jae. Minho nodded and disappeared back inside. Seojun turned to me fully now, his hands still in his pockets, his shoulders relaxed but his eyes intense. Come back inside, he said quietly. Finish dinner with us, and if, at the end of the night, you still want to walk away, he paused, his voice dropping. I won't stop you. I stared at him, my chest tight, my mind screaming at me to run. But my heart was tired of running. Okay, I whispered. Seojin's expression softened, and he nodded. Okay. He held the door open for me, and I stepped back inside. The warmth of the restaurant wrapping around me like a promise I wasn't sure I was ready to believe. But maybe I was willing to try. The warmth hit me first when I stepped back inside. The noise, the laughter, the sizzle of meat on the grill, it all rushed back in, grounding me, pulling me out of my head. Seojun's hand hovered near my lower back, not quite touching, just there. A presence, a reassurance. Hyunwoo and Minjae were still at the table, but their expressions had shifted. Hyunwoo's arms were uncrossed now, his posture less rigid. Minjae's smile was softer, more careful. They'd been talking about me. I could feel it. I slid back into the booth, and Seojin settled beside me again, closer this time. Close enough that his thigh pressed against mine under the table, and I didn't pull away. I should have, but I didn't. Sorry, I said quietly, not meeting anyone's eyes. I just needed a minute. Don't apologize, Minjae said gently. We came on too strong. That's on us. Hyunwoo's gaze was still on me, steady and unreadable. You said you have a son. I tensed. Hyung, Seojin said, his tone warning. I'm not judging. Hyunwoo's voice was blunt, but not unkind. I'm asking. I swallowed hard, my hands gripping the edge of the table. Yes, his name is Minho. He's 4. And his father? Hyunwoo pressed. Hyung. It's okay, I said quietly, cutting Seojin off. I looked at Hyunwoo, forcing myself to hold his gaze. His father left, before Minho was born. I haven't seen him since. Hyunwoo's jaw tightened. Did he know you were pregnant? Yes. And he still left? I nodded, my throat tight. Hyunwoo exhaled slowly, something dark flickering across his face. Then he's a coward. The word hung in the air, sharp and final. I didn't know what to say. Minjae leaned forward, his expression soft. That must have been really hard, Jiwon, raising a kid on your own. It was. My voice came out quieter than I intended. It still is. But Minho, he's worth it. Every sleepless night, every extra shift, every time I have to choose between paying rent or buying him new shoes. I paused, blinking back the sting in my eyes. He's worth all of it. Seojin's hand found mine under the table. I froze. His fingers brushed against my knuckles, light and tentative, like he was asking permission. I didn't pull away, so he laced his fingers through mine, his grip warm and steady, and I felt something in my chest crack open, just a little bit more. You love him, Seojin said quietly. It wasn't a question. More than anything. Then he's lucky to have you. I looked at him, surprised, and found his gaze already on me, soft, sincere, without a trace of pity. I'm not sure luck has anything to do with it, I said, my voice shaking. I'm just trying not to mess him up too badly. Minje laughed softly. I think that's what every parent thinks. Maybe. I glanced down at our joined hands, my heart pounding. But most parents have help, a partner, a pack. I'm just me. You're not alone anymore, Hyunwoo said, his voice low. I looked up, startled. He was watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. If you let us in, Jiwon, you won't have to do this alone. You don't even know me, I whispered. Not yet, Minje agreed, his smile returning. But we'd like to. Why? The question burst out of me, raw and desperate. Why do you care? I'm nobody. I'm just some Omega your grandfather met once. I don't understand why you're all sitting here, looking at me like I'm something special when I'm not. I'm just ours. The word came from Seo-jun, quiet but absolute. I stared at him. He stared back, his expression serious, his hand tightening around mine. You're ours, he repeated, his voice steady. Maybe not yet, maybe not officially, but the moment my grandfather told us about you, something shifted, and now that I've met you, he paused, his gaze dropping to our joined hands. I can't walk away. None of us can. That's insane, I breathed. Maybe. Minje's grin was crooked. But our grandfather has never been wrong about this kind of thing. And if he says you're meant to be ours, he shrugged. Then we're going to do everything we can to prove him right. I looked at each of them in turn. Seo-jun, steady and grounding, his hands still wrapped around mine. Minje, warm and disarming, his smile soft and patient. Hyunwoo, sharp and guarded, but his eyes were burning with something I couldn't name. 3 alphas, 3 strangers. And yet sitting here with them, I didn't feel like a stranger. I felt seen. I don't know how to do this, I whispered. Do what? Seo-jun asked gently. Trust. The word came out broken. I don't know how to trust that this is real, that you're real, that you won't. I trailed off, my voice cracking. Leave? Hyunwoo finished quietly. I nodded, unable to speak. Hyunwoo leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his gaze locked on mine. We're not him, Jiwon. We're not the alpha who walked away, and we're not going anywhere. You don't know that. Yes, I do. The certainty in his voice made my chest ache. How? I whispered. Hyunwoo's expression softened, just barely. Because our grandfather didn't just tell us you were fated to be ours. He told us we were fated to be yours. And that means protecting you, providing for you, staying. He paused, his jaw tightening. No matter what. Tears burned at the corners of my eyes and I blinked them back furiously. I wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of them. But Seo-jun's thumb brushed over my knuckles, gentle and soothing, and it took everything in me not to break. I have a son, I said again, my voice trembling. If you're serious about this about me, then you need to understand that Minho comes first. Always. He's my priority. My responsibility. And if you can't handle that, we can, Minji said firmly. We want to. I looked at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt, but found none. We want to meet him, Seo-jun added quietly. When you're ready. No pressure, just, we want to know the person who matters most to you. My breath hitched. They wanted to meet Minho. They wanted to be part of my life. Both of our lives. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, my throat too tight for words. Minje grinned. Good, because I make a mean mac and cheese, and I've been told 4-year-olds appreciate that. Despite everything, I laughed, a small, shaky sound that surprised even me. He does like mac and cheese. Then it's settled. Minji leaned back, looking pleased with himself. First play date, mac and cheese and dinosaurs. I assume he likes dinosaurs. He's obsessed with them. Perfect. I have a nephew who's into dinosaurs too. I know all the names. He paused, grinning. Well, some of them. The ones that don't have 30 letters. I smiled despite myself, and for the first time all night, the knot in my chest loosened. Just a little. Just enough. We stayed at the restaurant for another hour. The conversation shifted to lighter things. Minjae's terrible cooking skills, Hyunwoo's obsession with hiking, Seojin's tendency to overthink everything. They asked about my favorite foods, my favorite movies, what Minho liked to do on weekends. They asked about me, not about my heat cycle, not about bonding, not about any of the things most alphas cared about. Just me. And slowly, carefully, I started to let my guard down. Not all the way, but enough. By the time we left the restaurant, I felt lighter than I had in years. Seojin drove me home, and this time the silence in the car wasn't heavy. It was comfortable, easy. When he pulled up in front of my building, he turned to look at me, his expression serious. "Can I see you again?" My heart stuttered. "You want to?" "Yes." "Why?" He smiled a real, full smile that made something warm bloom in my chest. "Because I like you, Jawon, and because I want to know what happens next." I stared at him, my pulse racing, and felt that crack in my chest widen just a little more. "Okay," I whispered. Seojun's smile widened. "Okay." He walked me to the door, his presence solid and reassuring at my side. And when we stopped in front of the entrance, he didn't try to kiss me. He just looked at me, his gaze soft and warm, and said, "Good night, Jiwon." "Good night, Seojun." I turned to go inside, but his voice stopped me. "Jiwon." I glanced back. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for giving us a chance." I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled, small and fragile, but real, and disappeared inside. Miss Hannah was asleep on my couch when I got home, and Minho was curled up in his bed, clutching his stuffed brachiosaurus. I paid Miss Hannah, thanked her profusely, and watched her leave before sinking onto the couch, my body trembling with exhaustion and something else I couldn't name. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen. 3 new messages. Seojin. "Thank you for tonight." Minjae. "Already planning the mac and cheese menu. Hope Minho likes extra cheese." Hyunwoo. "You're stronger than you think." I read them over and over, my chest tight, my vision blurring. And for the first time in 4 years, I let myself hope. Just a little. Just enough. I stared at the messages on my phone until my vision blurred, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I should say something back, something simple, something normal. But my hands were shaking and my chest felt too tight, and all I could think was, what if this is real? What if they meant it? What if I let myself believe, and they stayed? The thought terrified me more than the alternative. I set the phone down on the coffee table and pressed my palms against my face, breathing slowly through my nose. One step at a time, Jiwon. That's what I'd told myself for 4 years. One breath. One day. One choice. And tonight I'd made a choice. I'd said yes to dinner. I'd said yes to trying, and maybe that was enough for now. I stood, my legs unsteady, and walked to Minho's room. He was still asleep, his tiny body curled around his stuffed dinosaur, his face peaceful and soft in the dim glow of his nightlight. I knelt beside his bed and brushed a strand of hair off his forehead, my chest aching with something too big to name. "I met some people tonight," I whispered, even though he couldn't hear me. 3 alphas. And they want to meet you, Minhoya. They want to be part of our lives. My voice cracked. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I don't know if I can trust them. But, I paused, my hand trembling as I traced the curve of his cheek. But I think I want to try. For you. For us. Minho stirred in his sleep, his small hand reaching out to clutch mine, and I felt tears slip down my cheeks. "I just want you to be happy," I whispered. "That's all I've ever wanted." I stayed there for a long time, holding his hand, letting the quiet settle around me like a blanket. And when I finally stood and walked back to the living room, I picked up my phone. To Seojin, "Thank you for tonight, for everything." To Minjae, "Minho does like extra cheese. You might be his new favorite person." To Hyunwoo, "I'm trying to believe that." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. And then I waited. 3 dots appeared almost immediately under Seojun's name. Seojun, "Sleep well, Jiwon. I'll text you tomorrow. Minjae. Yes, I knew it. Mac and cheese supremacy. Hyunwoo. Good. Keep trying. I smiled despite myself, my chest loosening just a little more. And for the first time in years, I fell asleep without the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders. The phone buzzing on my nightstand pulled me from sleep. I groaned, reaching for it blindly, my eyes still heavy. 7:02 a.m. Seojun. Good morning. Are you free this weekend? I blinked, my brain still foggy with sleep, and stared at the screen. This weekend? It was Thursday. That was only 2 days away. My heart kicked into overdrive, and I sat up, running a hand through my hair. To Seojun. Maybe. Why? Seojun. We'd like to meet Minho, if you're comfortable with that. I stared at the message, my pulse pounding in my ears. They wanted to meet him. Already. I knew I should have been nervous, protective, hesitant, but instead I felt relieved. Because if they were serious about this, about me, about us, then they needed to meet Minho. They needed to see what my life actually looked like. The chaos, the exhaustion, the tiny beautiful pieces that made it all worthwhile. And if they couldn't handle it, better to know now. To Seojun. Okay, Saturday afternoon? Seojun. Perfect. We'll come to you. Just tell us what Minho likes. I smiled, my chest warm. To Seojun. Dinosaurs, mac and cheese. And please don't be offended if he asks you a million questions. He's very curious. Seojun. I wouldn't expect anything less. I set the phone down and exhaled slowly, my hands trembling. Saturday. In 2 days, 3 alphas would be in my apartment, meeting my son, stepping into the life I'd built from scratch. And I had no idea if I was ready, but I was going to try anyway. I heard Minho stirring in his room, his small voice calling out, Appa? I'm here, Minhoya, I called back, pushing myself out of bed. He appeared in my doorway moments later, his hair sticking up in every direction, his stuffed Brachiosaurus dragging behind him. Is it breakfast time? Almost. I walked over and scooped him up, pressing a kiss to his forehead. But first, I need to tell you something. His eyes widened. What? I carried him to the couch and sat down, settling him in my lap. Remember how I told you I had dinner with some friends? He nodded eagerly. The ones who like you? My chest tightened. Yes, those friends. Well, they want to meet you. Minho's face lit up. Really? Really? They're coming here on Saturday. Is that okay with you? Yes! He bounced in my lap, grinning. Can I show them my dinosaurs? Of course you can. And my drawings? Whatever you want to show them, Minhoya. He threw his arms around my neck, squeezing tight. I can't wait, Appa. I held him close, breathing in his clean, safe scent, and felt something in my chest settle. This was the right choice. It had to be. Saturday came faster than I expected. I spent the morning cleaning the apartment, not that there was much to clean. It was small, barely 700 square feet, with a living room that doubled as a dining room, a kitchen the size of a closet, and 2 tiny bedrooms. But it was ours, and I wanted it to look okay, not perfect, just okay. Minho helped, dragging his toy bin to the corner and organizing his dinosaurs by size, his little face scrunched up in concentration. Appa, are your friends really coming? I paused, setting down the dish towel I'd been folding. Yes, they are. Are they nice? I think so. Will they like me? My chest tightened and I crouched down in front of him, cupping his small face in my hands. Minho-ya, they're going to love you. How could they not? He grinned, his eyes bright. Because I'm awesome, I laughed, pulling him into a hug. Exactly, because you're awesome. He squeezed me tight and I held him close, breathing in his clean, safe scent. And if they don't like dinosaurs, Minho added seriously, I'll teach them. I'm sure they'd appreciate that. The knock on the door came at exactly 2 o'clock. My heart jumped into my throat. Minho looked up from his dinosaur pile, his eyes wide. Are they here? Yeah, I said, my voice shaking. They're here. I walked to the door, my hands trembling, and pulled it open. All three of them stood in the hallway. Seojun, in a dark sweater and jeans, holding a bag that smelled like fresh bread. Minjae in a hoodie and sneakers, carrying a grocery bag that I could already tell was full of cheese. Hyunwoo in a leather jacket and dark slacks, holding a wrapped box with a dinosaur print on the paper. They looked too big for the narrow hallway, too polished, too everything. And yet, when Seojun's eyes met mine, all I felt was warmth. "Hi," I said quietly. "Hi," Seojun said, his voice soft. Minjae grinned. "Hope we're not late." Hyunwoo took forever deciding on a gift. Hyunwoo shot him a look. I wanted it to be right. "It's perfect," I said quickly, stepping aside. "Come in, please." They filed into the apartment, and I watched them take in the small space, the worn couch, the mismatched chairs, the crayon drawings taped to the walls. I waited for judgment, for pity, but all I saw was curiosity. "Nice place," Minja said, setting the grocery bag on the counter. "Cozy." "It's small," I said, my voice tight. "It's home," Seojun corrected, his gaze warm. I swallowed hard, my chest aching, and then I heard it. "Appa, are those the friends?" I turned. Minho was standing in the doorway to his room, his stuffed brachiosaurus clutched in one hand, his eyes wide and curious as he stared at the three alphas. My heart clenched. "Yes, Minho-ya. These are my friends." Minho walked over slowly, stopping in front of me and peeking out from behind my leg. "Hi," he said softly. Seojun crouched down, his movements slow and careful, and smiled. "Hi, Minho. I'm Seojun. It's nice to meet you." Minho studied him for a long moment, then pointed at the bag in Seojun's hand. "What's that?" "Bread," Seojun said, "and some pastries. Your appa said you like sweet things." Minho's eyes lit up. "I do." Minjae crouched down next, grinning. "I'm Minjae, and I brought cheese. A lot of cheese. Because your appa said you like mac and cheese. I love mac and cheese. Good, because I'm about to make the best mac and cheese you've ever had." Hyunwoo was the last to crouch, his expression serious as he held out the wrapped box. "I'm Hyunwoo, and this is for you." Minho's eyes went huge. "For me?" "For you." Minho looked up at me, his face full of hope. "Can I open it, Appa?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Minho tore into the wrapping paper with all the enthusiasm of a 4-year-old, and when he pulled out the contents, he gasped. It was a dinosaur figurine set detailed, high quality, with at least a dozen different species. "Whoa," Minho breathed. "Appa, look! It's a T-Rex, and a Triceratops, and... He trailed off, his hands trembling as he held up a Brachiosaurus. "It's like my stuffy." Hyunwoo's expression softened. "I thought you might like it." "I love it!" Minho threw his arms around Hyunwoo's neck, and I saw the alpha freeze, his eyes widening in surprise. But then, slowly, carefully, he wrapped his arms around Minho and held him. "You're welcome, kid," Hyunwoo said quietly. My vision blurred and I blinked hard, trying to keep the tears at bay. Minho pulled back, grinning, and looked at all three of them. "Do you guys like dinosaurs?" "I'm learning," Seojun said with a smile. "I know some," Minjae admitted, "but I might need a refresher." "I can teach you," Minho said eagerly. "I know all the names. Well, most of them. The easy ones." "That sounds perfect," Seojun said. And just like that, Minho grabbed Seojun's hand and started dragging him toward his toy pile, chattering a mile a minute about Stegosaurus plates and velociraptor claws. Minji followed, laughing, and Hyunwoo stood, his gaze meeting mine. "He's a good kid," Hyunwoo said quietly. "He's everything," I whispered. Hyunwoo's expression softened. "I can see that." And then he walked over to join the others, leaving me standing in the doorway. My chest so full I thought it might burst. The afternoon unfolded like something out of a dream. Minji took over my tiny kitchen, somehow turning a box of pasta and an absurd amount of cheese into the best mac and cheese I'd ever tasted. Minho sat on the counter, watching with wide eyes and asking questions about every step. Seojun sat on the floor with Minho's dinosaur collection spread out around him. listening with infinite patience as my son explained the difference between a brontosaurus and a brachiosaurus. Hyunwoo leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, but his expression was softer than I'd ever seen it. Every so often, he'd chime in with a question or a comment, and Minho would light up like Hyunwoo had just said the most interesting thing in the world. I stood in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, watching them, and felt something inside me shift. This was what I'd wanted for Minho. Not just a father, a family, people who looked at him like he mattered, like he was worth their time, their attention, their care, and these three alpha strangers just days ago were giving him exactly that. Appa! Minho's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. Come sit. Seojin says the T-Rex could bite through bones. I walked over and settled on the floor beside Seojin, close enough that our shoulders brushed. He glanced at me, his eyes warm. You okay? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Liar, he murmured, but there was no heat in it, just understanding. Minho climbed into my lap, his small body warm and solid, and I wrapped my arms around him. Can they come back, Appa? Minho asked, looking up at me with hopeful eyes. Can they visit again? My chest tightened. I don't know. Minho, ya. Why not? Because, I hesitated, glancing at the three alphas. Because they're very busy. We're not that busy, Minji said from the kitchen, grinning. In fact, I think we should make this a weekly thing. Saturday mac and cheese club. Minho gasped. Really? Really, Seojin said, his gaze on me. If your appa says it's okay? All eyes turned to me. Minho's bright and pleading. Minja's warm and teasing. Hyunwoo's steady and patient. Seojun's soft and full of something I was afraid to name. I swallowed hard. Okay, Minho cheered, throwing his arms around my neck, and I held him tight, my eyes burning. Thank you, Seojun said quietly. His voice meant only for me. I didn't trust myself to respond. We ate dinner together, mac and cheese, bread, and the pastries Seojun had brought. Minho talked nonstop, bouncing between dinosaur facts and questions about what the alphas did for work. We run a company, Hyunwoo said simply. What kind of company? A big one, Minjae said with a grin. Lots of buildings, lots of paperwork, very boring. Oh, Minho frowned. That does sound boring. It is, Seojun agreed, his lips twitching, but it pays the bills. Appa works 2 jobs, Minho said proudly. He works really hard. All 3 alphas went still. I felt my face heat. Minho. He does, Minho insisted, looking at them seriously. He's always tired, but he still plays with me, and reads to me, and makes me breakfast. He's the best appa. My throat closed up. Seojun's hand found mine under the table, his fingers lacing through mine and squeezing gently. He is, Seojun said quietly, his eyes on me. He really is. I couldn't look at him. If I did, I'd cry. After dinner, Minho started to fade, his energy finally running out. I carried him to his room, tucked him into bed, and sat beside him while he clutched his new Brachiosaurus figurine. I like your friends, Appa, he mumbled, his eyes already drooping. I'm glad, Minho-ya. Do they like us? My chest ached. I think they do. Good. He yawned, his voice barely a whisper. Because I want them to stay. Me too, I whispered back. But even as I said it, a cold knot of fear settled in my stomach. Because what if they didn't? What if this was just temporary? What if they got tired of the mess, the chaos, the reality of what my life actually looked like? What if they left? I kissed Minho's forehead and stood, my legs unsteady, and walked back to the living room. The 3 alphas were cleaning up, moving around my tiny kitchen with surprising ease. You don't have to do that, I said quietly. We want to, Minji said, drying a plate. I leaned against the doorframe, watching them, and felt that fear dig deeper. Jiwan! I looked up. Seojun was watching me, his expression careful. What's wrong? Nothing. Don't lie. I exhaled slowly, my hands trembling. This was really nice. Today, all of it. But? Hyunwoo prompted, setting down the dish towel. But I need you to be honest with me, I said, my voice shaking. Is this real? Or are you just humoring your grandfather? Because if this is just some experiment or obligation or... It's not, Seojin said firmly, stepping toward me. Jiwon, this isn't an experiment. We're here because we want to be. You say that now, I whispered. But what happens when this gets hard? When Minho has a tantrum in public, or I'm too tired to make conversation, or you realize that being with me means dealing with all of this? I gestured around the apartment, my voice breaking. What happens when you realize I'm not worth it? Seojin closed the distance between us in 2 strides, his hands cupping my face, his eyes burning. You are worth it, he said, his voice low and fierce. Do you hear me? You are worth every single second of this. And so is Minho. You don't know that. Yes, I do. How? I demanded, tears streaming down my face now. How can you possibly know? Because I've spent years looking for something I didn't even know I was missing, Seojun said, his thumbs brushing away my tears. And the moment I met you, I found it. I stared at him, my breath hitching. We all did, Minjae added quietly, stepping closer. Jiwon, you're not a burden. You're not too much. You're exactly what we've been looking for. And we're not going anywhere, Hyunwoo said, his voice steady. No matter how hard this gets. I shook my head, my chest heaving. You can't promise that. Watch us, Hyunwoo said simply. And then Seojin leaned down and pressed his forehead to mine, his breath warm against my skin. Let us prove it to you, he whispered. Please, Jiwon, let us in. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But the fear was still there, sharp and suffocating, whispering that this couldn't last, that nothing good ever did. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice breaking. I know, Seojin said softly. But you don't have to be brave alone anymore. His scent wrapped around me, cedar and smoke, grounding and safe, and I felt something inside me finally break. I collapsed against his chest, my hands fisting in his sweater, and sobbed. He held me, his arms strong and steady, and didn't let go. Minjae and Hyunwoo stepped closer, their presence surrounding me, and I felt their warmth, their strength, their certainty. I stayed there, wrapped in Seojun's arms, feeling the steady rise and fall of his chest against my cheek. His scent surrounded me, cedar and smoke, grounding and safe, and for the first time in years, I let myself be held. Really held. Not out of obligation, not out of pity, just held. Minja's hand rested on my shoulder, warm and steady. Hyunwoo stood close enough that I could feel his presence, solid and unmoving. They weren't running, they weren't pulling away, they were just here. I don't know how to do this, I whispered against Seojin's chest, my voice raw. I don't know how to let people in without waiting for them to leave. Then don't wait, Seojin said quietly, his hand moving to the back of my head, his fingers threading gently through my hair. Just be here, right now, with us. What if right now isn't enough? It is, Minji said softly. Right now is all we need. I pulled back slightly, just enough to look up at Seojun's face. His eyes were dark and warm, and there was something in them I didn't know how to name, something that made my chest ache and my breath catch. I have nothing to offer you, I whispered. No pack, no status. Just me and Minho, and this tiny apartment, and that's everything, Hyunwoo cut in, his voice low and firm. Don't you get it, Jiwon? We don't want status. We don't want perfection. We want you. Why? The question broke out of me, desperate and pleading. Why me? Seojun's thumb brushed across my cheekbone, wiping away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. Because when I look at you, he said quietly, I see someone who's been fighting alone for so long, they forgot what it feels like to have someone fight beside them. And I want to be that person for you. We all do. My breath hitched. You don't owe us anything, Minjae added, his hand still warm on my shoulder. You don't have to prove you're worth our time. You don't have to earn this. You just have to let us stay. And we will stay, Hyunwoo said, stepping even closer. Even when it's hard, even when you push us away, even when you're scared, we'll stay. I stared at them, at these 3 alphas who'd walked into my life just days ago, and somehow made me feel like I wasn't drowning anymore. Like maybe, just maybe, I could breathe. "I don't deserve this," I whispered. "Yes, you do," Seojin said firmly, "and we're going to spend however long it takes proving that to you." His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. Hyunwoo's phone started buzzing too. Then Minjae's. Seojin's jaw tightened, and he pulled out his phone, glancing at the screen. His expression shifted, something dark and sharp crossing his face. "What is it?" I asked, my voice small. "Work," he said tersely. "There's been an issue at the company, a big one." Hyunwoo was already reading his phone, his face grim. "We need to go, now." My stomach dropped. Of course something would pull them away. Seojin looked at me, his expression torn. "Jiwon." "It's okay," I said quickly, stepping back. "You should go. It sounds important." "It is," Hyunwoo said, but his eyes were on me, watching carefully. "But so are you." "I'm fine," I lied. "Really, you should go handle whatever it is." Minjae looked between his brothers and me, his expression conflicted. "Jiwon, we don't want to leave like this." "It's fine," I repeated, forcing a smile. "Go, I'll be here." The words tasted bitter in my mouth. "I'll be here, alone, like always." Seojin stepped toward me, his hand reaching for mine, but his phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. "We have to go," Hyunwoo said quietly. "But this conversation isn't over." "Okay," I whispered. Seojin squeezed my hand once, his eyes burning with something I couldn't read, and then they were moving toward the door. Minjae paused at the threshold, looking back at me. "We'll call you, as soon as we can." I nodded, and then they were gone. The door clicked shut, and I stood there in the sudden silence of my apartment, my chest hollow. I walked to the couch and sat down, my legs too unsteady to hold me. My phone was on the coffee table, screen dark and silent. I stared at it, waiting. Minutes passed, then an hour. No calls, no texts, nothing. I told myself it was fine. They were busy. They had an emergency. It didn't mean anything, but the fear that had been sitting in my chest all night suddenly roared to life. They left. They saw what your life really looks like, and they left, just like he did. I pressed my hands to my face, trying to breathe through the panic rising in my throat. This was why I didn't let people in. This was why I kept my walls up. Because the moment you let yourself hope, the moment you let yourself believe that maybe this time would be different, they left. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough that my legs went numb. Long enough that the apartment grew dark around me. Long enough that when my phone finally buzzed, I almost didn't hear it. I picked it up with trembling hands. "Seojin, I'm sorry we had to leave like that." "Are you okay?" I stared at the message, my vision blurring. "Are you okay?" No, I wasn't okay. Because for a few beautiful hours, I'd let myself believe that maybe I wasn't alone anymore. And then reality had crashed back in, reminding me that I was. To Seojin, "I'm fine. Handle your emergency. We can talk later." I hit send and set the phone down. It buzzed again immediately. Seojin, "Jiwon, please, talk to me." Minjae, "We didn't want to leave. You know that, right?" Hyunwoo, "We're coming back as soon as we can." I read the messages, my chest aching, and felt something inside me crack. They were saying all the right things, but words were easy. Staying was hard, and I'd learned a long time ago that when things got hard, people left. I turned my phone face down on the table and walked to my bedroom. Minho was still asleep, his new dinosaur clutched in his arms, his face peaceful. I stood in the doorway watching him and felt the weight of everything crash down on me. "I'm sorry, Minho-ya," I whispered. "I thought maybe this time would be different, but it wasn't. It never was." I crawled into my own bed, pulled the blanket over my head and let the tears come. Because for a few hours I'd let myself hope, and hope, I'd learned, was the most dangerous thing of all. I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of my own breathing and the distant hum of traffic outside. My phone kept buzzing. again and again and again. I didn't look at it. I couldn't, because every buzz felt like a reminder that they'd left, that when it mattered, when I'd finally let my guard down, they'd walked out the door. They had an emergency, the rational part of my brain whispered. It wasn't personal. But the other part, the part that had been abandoned before, the part that had spent 4 years building walls to keep Minho and me safe, that part whispered something else entirely. It's always personal. You're not worth staying for. I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to block out both voices. The buzzing stopped. Silence settled over the apartment like a weight. And somehow that was worse. I rolled onto my side, pulling my knees to my chest, and let the exhaustion wash over me. But sleep wouldn't come, because even with my eyes closed, all I could see was Seojin's face when his phone had started buzzing. The way his expression had shifted. The way he looked at me, torn, conflicted, but ultimately, gone. They'd all gone, just like I'd known they would. A soft knock on my bedroom door made me freeze. Appa? Minho's voice was small, sleepy, worried. I sat up quickly, wiping at my face even though he couldn't see me in the dark. I'm here, Minho-ya. The door creaked open, and his small silhouette appeared in the doorway, backlit by his nightlight. Why are you sad? My chest cracked open. I'm not sad, baby, just tired. He walked over to the bed, clutching his new brachiosaurus, and climbed up beside me without asking. He curled into my side, his small body warm and solid against mine. Did your friends leave? I swallowed hard. They had to go. They had work stuff. Are they coming back? The question hung in the air, heavy and impossible. I don't know, I whispered. Minho was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the edge of his dinosaur's tail. I hope they come back, he said softly. I liked them. My throat closed up and I pulled him closer, pressing my face into his hair. Me too, Minho-ya. Me too. We lay there together in the dark, and eventually Minho's breathing evened out, his small body going limp with sleep. But I stayed awake, staring at nothing, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. The knocking on my door started at dawn, not soft, not tentative, loud, insistent, desperate. I jerked awake, my heart pounding, and glanced at Minho. He was still asleep, thank God, curled up beside me with his dinosaur clutched to his chest. The knocking came again, harder this time. Ji-won? Seojun's voice muffled through the door. Ji-won, please. I know you're in there. My breath caught. I slid out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake Minho, and walked to the door on unsteady legs. I stood there for a long moment, my hand on the doorknob, my heart racing. Don't open it, the scared part of me whispered. If you open it, you'll have to face him. You'll have to feel this. But my hand turned the knob anyway. The door opened, and there he was. Seojin stood in the hallway, still wearing the same clothes from last night, his hair disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. He looked like he hadn't slept either. Ji-won, he breathed, and the relief in his voice was so raw it made my chest ache. I didn't say anything. I just stood there staring at him, my arms wrapped around myself. Can I come in? He asked quietly. I stepped aside. He walked past me into the apartment, and I closed the door behind him, my hands trembling. We stood in the living room, the early morning light filtering through the blinds, casting long shadows across the floor. You didn't answer my texts, Seojin said finally, his voice careful. I know. Why? I looked away, my jaw tight. Because I didn't know what to say. You could have said anything. You could have told me to go to hell. You could have, his voice cracked. You could have just let me know you were okay. I'm fine, I said flatly. No, you're not. I met his eyes, and the intensity in his gaze made my breath hitch. Don't do that, I said, my voice shaking. Don't act like you know me. Don't act like I care? Seojin stepped closer. Because I do, Ji-won. I care so much it's driving me insane. You left, I whispered. The words hung between us like shattered glass. Seojun's expression crumpled. I had to. There was a crisis at the company, a system breach that could have cost us millions. We had to handle it immediately. I know, I said quietly. I know it was important. But, but you think we chose work over you? I flinched, because yes, that's exactly what I thought. Seojun closed the distance between us in 2 strides, his hands reaching for me, but he stopped just short of touching, like he was asking permission. Jiwon, look at me, please. I forced myself to meet his eyes. I didn't want to leave, he said, his voice rough. None of us did, but we had 300 employees whose livelihoods were on the line. We had clients who trusted us. We had responsibilities we couldn't just walk away from. He paused, his jaw tightening. But the entire time we were there, all I could think about was you. About how you looked when we left. About how I'd just asked you to trust us, and then I walked out the door. You did, I said, my voice breaking. You walked out, just like he did, Seojun finished quietly. Just like Minho's father. Tears burned at the corners of my eyes. You don't understand what it's like. To finally let someone in, to finally believe that maybe things could be different, and then they leave, Seojun said. I know, Jiwon, I know. And I'm so sorry that we triggered that for you. But please believe me when I say this. He stepped closer, and this time his hands did reach for me, cupping my face gently. We came back. We finished what we had to do, and we came straight here. Because you matter more than sleep, more than rest, more than anything. I stared at him, my chest heaving, tears streaming down my face. How do I know you won't leave again? I whispered. You don't, Seojun said honestly. There will be other emergencies, other times when we'll have to choose between being here and handling something critical. But Jiwon, his thumbs brushed away my tears. We will always come back, every single time, no matter what. You can't promise that. Yes, I can, because you're not some obligation or experiment or charity case. You're ours, and we take care of what's ours. The word hit me like a physical blow. Ours. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice barely audible. I know. I don't know how to trust this. Then let us show you. Seojun leaned his forehead against mine, his breath warm on my skin. One day at a time, one choice at a time. Let us prove it to you. I closed my eyes, breathing him in cedar and smoke, grounding and safe. What if I can't? I whispered. What if I'm too broken to? You're not broken, Seojun said firmly. You're scared, and that's okay. But you're also the strongest person I've ever met. You've raised an incredible kid on your own. You've worked 2 jobs. You've built a life from nothing. You're not broken, Jiwon. You're a survivor. Something inside me shattered at those words. I collapsed against him, my hands fisting in his shirt, and sobbed. He held me, his arms strong and steady, and didn't let go. I'm here, he murmured into my hair. I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere. We stood like that for a long time, my tears soaking into his shirt, his heartbeat steady beneath my ear. And slowly, so slowly, I felt some of the fear begin to loosen its grip. Seojun? I whispered finally. Yeah? Thank you for coming back. His arms tightened around me. Always, Jiwon? Always. A door creaked behind us. We both turned. Minho stood in the doorway to his room, his hair sticking up, his dinosaur dangling from one hand. Seojun came back? He asked, his voice full of wonder. Seojun pulled back from me slightly, a soft smile crossing his face. Yeah, buddy, I came back. Minho's face lit up, and he ran across the room, launching himself at Seojun's legs. Seojun caught him easily, lifting him up, and Minho wrapped his arms around his neck. I knew you would, Minho said confidently. Appa was worried, but I knew. Seojun's eyes met mine over Minho's shoulder, warm and full of promise. Your Appa is very smart to be careful, Seojun said gently. But you're right, Minho, yeah. We'll always come back. Minho pulled back, looking at him seriously. Promise? Promise. Okay, Minho grinned. Can we have pancakes? I laughed, a surprised, broken sound that felt like the first real breath I'd taken in hours. Yeah, Minho, yeah. We can have pancakes. Seojun set him down, and Minho ran to the kitchen, already chattering about whether we had chocolate chips. Seojun turned back to me, his hand reaching for mine. This is going to be hard sometimes, he said quietly. We're going to mess up. You're going to be scared, but as long as we keep choosing each other, we'll figure it out, okay? I looked at our joined hands, then up at his face, and I made a choice. Okay, I whispered. His smile was soft and relieved and so full of warmth that I felt something in my chest finally settle. Come on, he said, tugging me toward the kitchen. Let's make pancakes, and then I'm going to take a nap on your couch because I haven't slept in 24 hours. You don't have to. I want to, he said firmly. I want to be here, with you and Minho, even if I'm unconscious on your couch. Despite everything, I smiled. Okay. And as we walked into the kitchen together, Minho already pulling out bowls and chattering about dinosaur-shaped pancakes, I felt something I hadn't felt in 4 years. Hope. Real, fragile, terrifying hope. But this time, I wasn't facing it alone. And as we walked into the kitchen together, Minho already pulling out bowls and chattering about dinosaur-shaped pancakes, I felt something I hadn't felt in 4 years. Hope. Real, fragile, terrifying hope. But this time, I wasn't facing it alone. Seojin kept his promise. After we made pancakes slightly misshapen dinosaurs that made Minho giggle and declare them perfect, Seojin collapsed on my couch, his body finally giving in to exhaustion. I covered him with a blanket, and he caught my wrist gently, his eyes already half closed. Stay, he murmured. I'm not going anywhere, I whispered back. He smiled and his hand relaxed, releasing me as sleep pulled him under. I stood there for a moment, watching him breathe, and felt my chest tighten with something I wasn't ready to name yet. The rest of the morning passed quietly. Minho played with his dinosaurs, occasionally running over to check if Seojun was still sleeping. I cleaned up the kitchen, folded laundry, and tried not to think too hard about the fact that there was an alpha asleep on my couch. An alpha who'd promised to stay. An alpha who'd already come back once. My phone buzzed. Minjae. How are you holding up? Seojin texted that he was with you. Hyunwoo. We handled the crisis. We'll be there by afternoon. I stared at the messages, my heart pounding. They were coming back, all of them. To Minjae. I'm okay. Seojin's here. He's asleep on my couch. To Hyunwoo. Thank you for handling it. For everything. The responses came quickly. Minjae. Good. He needed the rest. We'll bring dinner tonight. No arguments. Hyunwoo. You don't have to thank us. This is what family does. Family. The words sat heavy in my chest, warm and terrifying all at once. By afternoon, Seojin had woken up, looking more rested but still exhausted around the edges. He'd insisted on staying, on helping Minho build an elaborate dinosaur kingdom out of blocks and cushions. And when Minjae and Hyunwoo arrived at 6, carrying bags of Korean takeout and wearing matching expressions of relief when they saw me, something inside me finally began to believe. We ate dinner together, all 5 of us crowded around my tiny table. Minho talking a mile a minute, the alphas listening with infinite patience. Hyunwoo asked about my work, and when I mentioned Mrs. Choi's warning, his expression darkened. You're still working 2 jobs? I nodded. I have to. 1 job isn't enough to cover everything. The 3 of them exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. What if you didn't have to? Minjae asked carefully. I frowned. What do you mean? We mean, Seojin said quietly, his hand finding mine under the table, that if you let us help, you wouldn't have to work yourself to exhaustion anymore. My stomach dropped. I don't need charity. It's not charity, Hyunwoo cut in. It's what mates do. They take care of each other. The word hung in the air. Mates. My breath caught. We haven't. Not yet, Seojun agreed, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. But my grandfather was right, Jiwon. You're meant to be ours, and we're meant to be yours. We all feel it. I looked at each of them, my heart racing. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, Minji said gently. That's all we're asking. I swallowed hard. Okay, I'll think about it. The conversation shifted after that. Lighter topics, easier ground. But I could feel the weight of what they'd said pressing against my chest. Mates. After dinner, Minho started to fade again, his eyes drooping as he leaned against Hyunwoo's side. Someone's ready for bed, Hyunwoo murmured, his voice surprisingly soft. I'm not tired, Minho protested, even as he yawned. I smiled. Come on, Minho-ya. Let's get you to bed. But when I started to stand, Hyunwoo stopped me with a gentle hand on my shoulder. Let me, he said quietly. I hesitated, then nodded. Hyunwoo scooped Minho up easily, and my son wrapped his arms around the alpha's neck without protest. Night, Appa, Minho mumbled. Good night, baby. I watched Hyunwoo carry him to his room, heard the low rumble of his voice as he settled Minho into bed, and felt something crack open in my chest. This was what I'd wanted, not just for me, for Minho. People who cared, people who stayed, people who tucked him in and made him feel safe. When Hyunwoo returned, his expression was softer than I'd ever seen it. He's out, he said quietly. Asked me to tell you he loves you. My throat tightened. Thank you. The three of them stayed for another hour, just talking, just being present. And when they finally stood to leave, Seojun pulled me aside. Can I see you tomorrow? He asked quietly. Just you. I want to take you somewhere. My heart stuttered. Where? You'll see. His smile was soft. Trust me? I looked at him, at this alpha who'd come back, who'd held me while I cried, who'd made dinosaur pancakes with my son. Okay, I whispered. I trust you. His expression softened, and he leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to my forehead. Good night, Jiwon. Good night. The next evening, Seojun picked me up at 7. Miss Hannah had agreed to watch Minho again, and my son had been thrilled at the prospect of another sleepover with his favorite babysitter. Seojun drove us out of the city, through winding roads that climbed up into the hills overlooking Seattle. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and when he finally stopped the car, we were standing at a lookout point with the entire city spread out below us. It's beautiful, I breathed. It is, Seojun agreed. But when I glanced at him, he was looking at me, not the view. My face heated. Seojun, I need to tell you something, he said quietly, turning to face me fully. And I need you to listen, okay? My heart kicked into overdrive. Okay. He took my hands in his touch warm and steady. When my grandfather told us about you, I didn't believe him at first. I thought he was just being sentimental. But then I met you, and I understood. He paused, his gaze intense. You're everything I've been looking for, Jiwon. Everything we've been looking for. And I know you're scared. I know you've been hurt. But I need you to know that we're serious about this. About you. About Minho. About building a life together. Tears burned at the corners of my eyes. Seojun. I want to bond with you, he said, his voice rough. All three of us do. We want to make this official. We want you to be ours, and we want to be yours. Completely. My breath caught. Bonding. A mating bond. Permanent. Unbreakable. I know it's fast, Seojun continued, his thumbs brushing over my knuckles. And I know you need time, but I needed you to know how serious we are, how committed we are. To you. To this. I stared at him, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. What if I'm not ready, I whispered. Then we'll wait, Seojun said simply. However long it takes. We're not going anywhere, Jiwon. I looked at him, at this alpha who'd proven himself again and again, who'd held me when I broke, who'd promised to stay and meant it, and I felt something inside me shift, something fundamental and terrifying and absolutely certain. Ask me, I whispered. Seojun's eyes widened. Jiwon. Ask me, I repeated, my voice stronger now. Please. He stared at me for a long moment, his expression vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. And then he took a breath. Jiwon Park, he said quietly, his hands tightening around mine. Will you bond with us? Will you let us be your pack, your mates, your family? Tears streamed down my face, but for the first time in years, they weren't from fear. They were from hope, from certainty, from finally believing that I deserved this. Yes, I whispered. Seojun's expression cracked, relief and joy flooding his face, and he pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. Thank you, he murmured into my hair. Thank you for trusting us. I pulled back just enough to look up at him, and his hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing away my tears. And then he leaned down and kissed me, soft, gentle, reverent, like I was something precious, something worth keeping. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine, and I could feel his smile. "My brothers are going to be so happy," he murmured. I laughed, the sound shaky but real. "When?" "Whenever you're ready." He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine. "There's no rush. We'll do this at your pace." I nodded, my chest full. "Okay." We stood there for a while longer, wrapped in each other, watching the sun disappear behind the mountains and the city lights begin to glow below us. And for the first time in 4 years, I wasn't afraid of what came next, because I wasn't facing it alone anymore. 2 weeks later, we made it official. The bonding ceremony was small, just the 4 of us. Minho and their grandfather, who'd insisted on being present to see his prophecy fulfilled. We stood in the Alpha's family home, a beautiful traditional-style house in the suburbs, and when the 3 of them marked me one after another, their scents mingling with mine until I couldn't tell where they ended, and I felt something inside me finally settle. Home. This was home. Not a place, but them. Minho was ecstatic, declaring that he now had 3 awesome dads and insisting that we celebrate with dinosaur-shaped cake. The grandfather cried actual tears and kept saying, "I told you so," until Hyunwoo gently told him to stop gloating. And when night fell and Minho was asleep in his new room, bigger, brighter, filled with more dinosaurs than any 4-year-old should reasonably own, the 4 of us sat together in the living room. I was tucked between Seojun and Minjae on the couch, Hyunwoo sitting on the floor in front of us, his head resting against my knee. "How are you feeling?" Seojun asked quietly, his arm around my shoulders. I thought about it, about how far I'd come, about how terrified I'd been just weeks ago, about how I'd been so sure that letting them in would destroy me. But instead, it had saved me. "Happy?" I said finally. "I'm happy." Minjae pressed a kiss to my temple. "Good, because we're going to make sure you stay that way." Hyunwoo's hand found mine, his fingers lacing through mine and squeezing gently. And I felt it then, the bond, warm and solid and unbreakable, connecting me to all 3 of them. Mine. Ours. Forever. I leaned back against Seojun's chest, letting their presence surround me, and closed my eyes. This was what I'd been afraid of. This warmth, this certainty, this feeling of being completely, utterly seen. And it was everything. "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" Seojun murmured. "For not giving up on me." His arms tightened around me. "Never." We sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, wrapped in the bond. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because I finally believed this was real, this was forever, this was home. But just as I started to drift off, warm and safe and loved, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. Minji reached for it, glancing at the screen, and his expression shifted. "Jiwon," he said quietly. "You should see this." I sat up, taking the phone from him, my heart suddenly racing. It was a message from an unknown number. "Unknown. I know where you are, and I'm coming for what's mine." My blood turned to ice, because I recognized that phrasing, that possessiveness, that tone. No, it couldn't be. "Jiwon?" Seojun's voice was sharp now, concerned. "What is it?" I looked up at him, my hands trembling, the phone slipping from my fingers. "It's him," I whispered, "Minho's father." The room went deathly silent, and then Hyunwoo's voice, low and dangerous. "He's not taking either of you." But even as he said it, even as all 3 of them moved closer, their protection surrounding me like a shield, I felt it. The fear, the old wound, ripped open. The past I'd thought was buried forever, rising from the grave. I looked down at the phone on the floor, at those terrible words still glowing on the screen. "I'm coming for what's mine." And I realized with cold, creeping dread, this wasn't over. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out. If that ending wrecked you, hit subscribe. The next chapter drops soon.